Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the launch of the Digitally Enabled Climate Finance Reports. I'm Anna, Senior Insights Manager from the GSMA ClimateTech programme. For those of you that haven't come across us before, let me share a very brief introduction to our work. The GSMA is an association for mobile network operators. The ClimateTech programme is part of the GSMA's Mobile for Development team. We are placed at the intersection of the mobile ecosystem and the development sector, focusing on innovation to reduce inequalities in low and middle income countries. One pillar of our work is research, but we also lead local market engagement and advocacy to help build strategic partnerships, as well as providing grants to promising startups through our Innovation Fund. Today, we'll be discussing our latest flagship research report on digitally enabled climate finance, which was produced with support from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. This research offers unique insight into how mobile and digital technology can be leveraged to strengthen the access and delivery of climate finance in low and middle income countries. In this session, you'll hear from the report author, Judith Mulwa, who will share some of the key findings from the research. We're also delighted to have a panel of experts with us today who will share their views and experiences on this topic. But we also want to hear from you, so please do use the chat function to introduce yourselves and share any questions that you might have. So before we get into the research, I would like to invite Phil Outram from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office to share some opening remarks.
Hi, thanks Anna. Yeah, as Anna said, my name is Phil Outram. I'm a Tech and Innovation Advisor with the UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and also part of the FCDO's Climate Cadre. So clearly, the climate crisis is existential and finance is at the heart of tackling it. Which is why we, the UK, have committed to spend £11.6 billion between 2021 and 2025. But there's a huge question on how this can best be spent. So I lived and worked in the Sahel for several years, and I saw the desperate need for climate action and climate finance. But much of it's going to large climate pots like the Green Climate Fund. And I saw firsthand how difficult it is to spend money this way, with governments ill-equipped to manage large projects and associated partnerships and funds. We also know that donor funding is just a small part of the solution. It's vital we mobilise all the funding we can. And we think digital technology, is uniquely placed to disrupt and accelerate climate finance. So we were really pleased to be able to support this report and its findings, the models and best practices for how mobile and digital technologies can ensure vital funds reach the most vulnerable people and communities. We're also pleased to be supporting a range of digital tech for climate finance, including the CAVEX platform, which you'll hear about shortly. So a big thank you from the FCDO for joining this call and GSMA for all their work, and I look forward to this presentation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. So next, we'll hear from Judith Mulwa, Insights Manager for the ClimateTech programme and author of this report.
Thank you, Anna. As Anna said, I will be sharing with you a summary of the insights of the flagship report. This is a landscape flagship report looking at digitally enabled climate finance and specifically on the access and delivery of climate finance using mobile and digital technology in low and middle income countries. So I will start by sharing how climate finance is perceived by the public, but also the private sector. So what we learned is climate finance is perceived differently. And this perception is sometimes pegged on national policies, it's pegged on the sources of financing, and even at times on institutional mandates. And in this regard, there is a divergent understanding on what climate finance is. For the public sector, climate finance is perceived as the flow of financing from developed to developing countries on climate change. And this is majorly pegged on the Kyoto and the Paris Agreement. But in some instances, climate finance is viewed as financial assistance through incrementality. However, the working definition for the public sector climate finance for this report is financial flows towards climate adaptation and mitigation. For the private sector, climate finance is perceived as corporate social responsibility, in some instances corporate social investments, in some instances sustainability and ESG. To some, it is private capital that is flowing to climate initiatives, and finally, net zero commitments. So with this in mind, let's have a look at how and when digital technologies then converge with climate finance. This research piece identified that effective climate finance delivery and access is anchored on 4 very important pillars. So to start with, we have climate data. Climate data, as you would all know, it's key in making climate finance decisions. Digital technologies such as big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things have been deployed to ensure quality climate finance data. And Bumitra is an example of innovation that has been doing this. Secondly, the data needs to flow in traceable and transparent financial systems. So digital technologies such as blockchain have been used. And this is quite a challenge in the climate finance space, as you would know. And this has been exemplified by Climate Action Data Trust. Thirdly, vulnerable communities have been seen to benefit a lot from adaptable climate finance instrument. And this is largely in the form of debt and insurance. It is also a response to the shift in climate financing from grants. And so digital technologies used include mobile money, USSD, we have big data and machine learning, among others. And MCOPA is a good case study on this. And lastly, when you're looking at climate information, this has been shared through mobile applications over time and USSD. And this is a very common intervention, as I mentioned, and a very good example is DigiFarm here in Kenya. So very quickly, let's have a look at some of the digital climate finance models in low, middle, and income countries. The very interesting one that has raised eyebrows lately is the voluntary carbon markets. So particularly in voluntary carbon markets, we would look at marketplaces, and marketplaces such as CAVEX, as Phil had alluded earlier on. And CAVEX, as an example, plays a very important role in climate finance access and delivery. Since data is important, they've been able to digitize and automate end-to-end data capture and verification. Such marketplace has facilitated quick onboarding of micro projects. It has also enabled triangulation, verification, and accountability of data, and facilitated micro project aggregation, mainly in energy and agricultural projects. And finally, it has improved market visibility for buyers and sellers. Another interesting one is the intersection of IoT and pay-as-you-go. The pay-as-you-go model is vastly applied in the agricultural and energy sectors in LMICs. And the convergence in the agricultural sector provides quality data that can inform decisions about access to performance-based loans and participation in carbon markets. Well, in the energy sector, the convergence of IoT, which is the Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence has enabled the pay-as-you-go service providers to tailor products and services to meet the customer needs. For FinTech, which is another model that we got into, satellite data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning has been seen to play a very key role in data collection. As we mentioned, data is very key, which has enabled the provision of advisory services and data management. Well, for mobile wallets have facilitated end-to-end digital payments, which is very important in making sure that climate finance reaches the most vulnerable. And it can also be used to ensure that climate finance is actually traceable. And lastly, looking at FinTech. FinTech supports the development of unified payment systems, which is a public infrastructure that supports private innovations. And this has been exemplified in India under the National Payments Corporation of India. It is important in the climate finance context as it facilitates traceability of climate finance flows. The fourth and also very unique climate model is focusing on the private sector. And for the public sector, digital monitoring, reporting, and verification systems facilitate streamlined data collection, processing, and quality control. These systems have been seen to support the interconnectedness of technologies, which can also connect to sectoral, national, and international registries. This is very important in communicating real-time outcomes and ensuring consistency and accuracy in the data provided. And finally, a very interesting intersection is here on gender and climate finance. Digital technologies such as AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning can be employed to collect gender disaggregated data, which is important in tailoring women-specific climate finance, products, services, or interventions. And secondly, as you would all agree, social norms have been an inhibitor to women's financial inclusion. It's quite a milestone for women to leverage mobile money, which can generate credit ratings for loans. And these credit ratings bypass the need for borrowers to have traditional forms of collateral, such as property. Thank you so much for listening in. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Judith. So it's now time for our panel. I'd like to invite Tabanam from the Kenya Climate Innovation Centre, or KCIC, to lead the session. And please remember to add any questions that you might have on the chat.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you so much, Judith, for that wonderful presentation. Isn't that interesting? Voluntary carbon markets has been mentioned as one of the key innovations under the mobile technologies. And just yesterday, the newspapers, especially in Kenya, has been flooded with the carbon auction that has happened, which has generated billions, apparently. A lot of diagnosis will happen anyways on that. Good morning. My name is Prabhakar Vanam. I'm the CEO of KCIC Consulting Limited. We are part of the research team that has conducted this study. Just to give a little bit of background, KCIC Consulting has been in the work of doing a lot of research in the climate finance space, as well as working in the intersection of private sector development and climate change. With that introduction, we'll be having this panel discussion for the next 20-25 odd minutes, and this is a chance for everyone to hear from the experts. We have put together a fantastic team of experts here, covering all the aspects that Judith has just mentioned in her presentation. The format for the panel discussions is quite simple. Considering the time that we have, we'll be going straight into the question and answer kind of sessions, where we'll be asking some relevant questions to our panelists here, and then we'll be hearing their thoughts. So without further ado, let me first invite my good friend Michael here. I'm sure most of the people know here Michael is. Michael represents the MNO, Mobile and Network Organizations. He is the environmental and social lead for Airtel Africa. He has over 15 years of working experience in the corporate sector of sustainability, having started his career at Unilever before joining Savannah Cement and later Telco Industries at Safaricom, GSMA, and currently at Airtel Africa. He is also responsible for development and implementation of the environmental and social pillars of Airtel Africa's sustainability strategy across 14 markets in Africa. So welcome, Michael. The first question is to you as a mobile network organization or operator. Based on some of the challenges that innovators face in the delivery of climate finance to the most vulnerable, what can a mobile network organizations like Airtel Africa can offer to innovators in this space?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And hello again, everyone. So I think for me, first of all, maybe just a quick introduction of our organization. So Airtel Africa, of course, we are telco. We operate in 14 countries in Africa, which is slightly dynamic. It's underserved in some cases. not a lot of network penetration, and so this creates a lot of demand in terms of growth and a lot of opportunities. We currently have more than 31,500 infrastructure sites across the 14 markets, 2.6 million touch points in terms of retail shops, agents and distribution, over 70,000 kilometers of fiber, and 90% of our sites, being served by our 4G network. So to your question, I think one of the key areas, one of the challenges that innovators and entrepreneurs, especially in Africa, are facing revolves around capacity and resources required to capture data that is required for climate finance facilitation. So MNOs have a huge opportunity, I think, here in terms of offering digital solutions for data capture, especially for climate finance. One example that I would give, and probably relevant to this, is actually on satellite imagery, remote sensing, and GIS. So when you're looking at climate and the impact of climate or the different sectors of an economy, you would actually require information on to see real-time information on the impact that it has on the ground. So satellite data, normally generated via remote sensing technologies, I think provides reliable and timely information about the Earth's surface and the changes over time. And this data, I think, is useful really in improving livelihoods, for example, in crop and livestock production in this side of the world, forestry activities, and of course, generally on the ecosystems. And it provides a lot of planning information for government agencies, insurers, relief agencies, and different other interventions that are required. What are we doing as an MNO? We've explored different opportunities with different specialist organizations as Airtel through our Airtel business segment. So one of the things that we do, one of the examples that I can give is on the low Earth orbit satellite connections. And this allows us to connect and reach to places that are actually rarely served by network, especially in rural areas in Africa, to offer essential services to customers, to NGOs, to mining sectors, to forestry, and even gas companies. We are also working with different partners. So OneWeb is an example where we provide the low Earth orbit satellites, which we call LEO connectivity, for a wide range of use cases, especially in agriculture, hospitals, hotel industry. Amazon Web Services is also one of our partners, where we provide our customers with cloud and data services for different customers. I think the other obvious one, of course, is on mobile money, which sort of cuts across different sectors. So mobile money would always allow you, with the use of your phone, to access different financial services. And with this, there could be different products. So it could, as Judy mentioned earlier, there could be opportunities for pay as you go for different services. We have savings solutions under it, and different others. An example we have in Uganda is what we are calling Airtel Super Saver product, which is in a collaboration with a bank, KCB, which we started in the year 2022. This product enables our Airtel Money customers to access important saving products via mobile phones without owning a bank account. In Nigeria, we have the Payment Services Bank, which also have a lot of other solutions around mobile money. Allow me to give one example that is related to climate in our market in Niger. So in Niger, we have a product or a project that we are calling Digital Innovations for Agropastoral Communities. The aim of this project is to increase resilience and food security for agropastoral families, especially in the southern part of the country, by providing accessible digital platform for people to get involved in agriculture and also livestock crop protection and also livestock breeding. So it includes a contact center. It has an e-marketplace and a portfolio of mobile financial products for agribusiness. It allows microcredit, micro savings, credit scoring, and payments and reimbursements made through mobile phones. So it's a whole range of solutions which allows users to access, mobile money services, get information on agriculture, livestock, and financial products. But we don't do it alone. So it also requires a lot of collaboration. So we are working with over there with the Ministry of Agriculture in Niger, SNV, as community associations on agriculture, and even breeders for different agricultural products. So what does this solution require? I think it uses low technology like USSD and SMS, and it also goes to more complex technology like IoT, machine learning to analyze the different segments, like for weather and the customers. So I think in a nutshell, we require collaborations in this, and also government support in terms of giving the right policies and regulatory environment for it to thrive. Over to you, Vishal.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. There were so many points that you mentioned, from simple technologies to the more complex technologies, but most importantly, you did mention as to how you are able to reach the innovators and entrepreneurs. So that brings to my next question. I think this is to Chintal. One of the things that Michael was mentioning was how the technology has made it accessible to the innovators and entrepreneurs. The question would be specifically on women, but before I do that, let me also do the introduction of who Chintal is. Chintal Barot is the founder and director of Co-Sustain Consulting Limited. She works at the intersection of gender and climate finance, advising investors, companies, and governments. Her focus is on emerging markets, particularly Africa and Asia. Most of you would have heard it, she helped set up the 2X Global Initiative and is a strategic advisor to the senior leadership team. So Chintal, back to the question, picking up from where Michael has left, the intersection of gender and climate finance is quite unique. This was also presented in the findings of the report by Judith. And Michael did mention about how technology can make it easy to access to the innovators or entrepreneurs. But what considerations should climate finance actors explore in the implementation of gender initiatives, investments for the private sector, tailoring climate finance products towards women, and whether the technology is already been accessible to women as it is accessible to men? Your perspective, Chintal.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on the panel. Look, I think it's a great and a really important question to ask. Maybe just a little bit of just step back a little bit to say, when we're looking at this nexus of climate change and gender, I think it's really important to acknowledge that a lot of the narrative tends to be around women as victims of climate change. And we know that they are disproportionately impacted. So definitely not denying that. But when we're looking at the private sector and the delivery of climate finance, there's the other side of it, is that they're not only disproportionately impacted, but they're the actual agents of change here. So when we look at adaptation and mitigation solutions, we need to be empowering women as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as you say, as employees in the private sector and in their communities. And that means really allowing them to access the climate finance in all of the different ways that Judith mentioned, and in all of the great initiatives that Michael mentioned as well. And so the question to sort of, to providers like Airtel Africa and to all of those digital providers of climate finance is, am I really capitalizing on this opportunity to serve the women's market? And I think your question goes a bit deeper. So what are the considerations? If you're already convinced that there is a clear business case for serving women, then what are the different types of considerations? And I think perhaps what I can do is point to some of the work that we do in 2X Global. Just a little clarification. So I'm the strategic advisor to 2X Global. It's headed up by CEO called Jessica Espinosa and a brilliant team at the membership-led organization. And what we do is we work across a wide range of financial institutions and funds and other private sector entities to say, how can you tailor your products and services for the female market? So very practically, we actually have a working group where we work with transaction officers from across DFIs and MDBs and other financial institutions. And we look at each stage of the way that they invest, and we look at how they actually work with their investee companies. And those investee companies can be banks, MFIs, some of the partners that Michael talked about. And then we go a lot deeper into those products and services. And that's both financial and non-financial products and services. And the non-financial products and services can be equally as important as the financial products and services. And what we find when you look at those financial products and services is that you do need to think about the women's segment. So collateral, for example, is quite a well-known consideration here. We know that often in many parts of the world, women don't have collateral for accessing loans, for example. And so products like revenue-based financing, cash flow-based financing start becoming incredibly important. We know that outreach to women, if it isn't really tailored and targeted to them, having officers in the field, for example, perhaps they're female officers or the officers who are really equipped to engage with women, that becomes really important to really sort of, reach those communities. So we do a lot of work on the financial products to really think about women, who's accessing these kinds of products, how are they able to access them? And then obviously it becomes even more important when you look at the digital aspect of it. And then on the non-financial products and services, for example, financial literacy becomes incredibly important around a particular product if you're trying to promote it. To try and disseminate knowledge on all aspects of that product. Oftentimes we find that perhaps groups of women can be a little bit nervous about accessing loans. And so that form of non-financial product, services also becomes really important. Maybe to give another example. So, talked a little bit about tailoring of financial products and services and non-financial products and services. And I think data research and studies are also critically important here. And Judith mentioned, the example of M-Copper earlier in her presentation. Now, M-Copper did quite an interesting study supported by one of their funders, BII. And BII actually were one of the instigators of 2X Global. So they're very keen on the climate and gender nexus. And they did the study into a new fridge solar product where they found that it resulted in 8 hours of time savings for female-headed households, $15 to $20 of savings per month, and other income gains through productive use of that particular product. So that's really important because it starts building up the data and the business case for why that product should be tailored and targeted and marketed to the female market.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that's quite a comprehensive scenario, Chintal. Thank you so much for presenting it so comprehensively. You have pointed out quite a few issues, especially for the women entrepreneurs, but I guess there are similar issues for the other innovators as well. So that brings me to my next question to John. John is a co-founder and director of 4R Digital, leveraging digital financial services and connectivity to drive markets and financial inclusion for low-income customers and increasing revenues for businesses of all sizes. So 4R Digital works in the carbon, is developing the much spoken about carbon value exchange, CAPEX in short form, that connects micro small projects with international carbon markets. I think this is this has been one of the key requests from many innovators whom KCIC Consulting is also working with. John's previous roles, he has included Director of MCOPA Labs, Principal Consultant with Coffee International Development, and he was also Co-founder, Director of Ecotourism Finance Natural Resource Management Company. So John, welcome. As Fora Digital and as somebody who has been spearheading the work under the CAPEX project, you would have seen, you would have heard a lot of problems that Chintal has also mentioned, and innovators do face a lot of problems in terms of choosing climate finance. How do they get into this? How do they access more of climate finance? So as what would you suggest, or what kind of solution would you propose to an innovator who wants to venture into the climate finance space, and especially from the mobile and digital technology perspectives? What could be presently adopted for them to ensure easy access and delivery of climate finance, specifically in the LMICs? And lastly, John, what could be the potential challenges that you are facing in deployment of these challenges? Over to you, John.
Great. Sorry. Thank you. Quite a bunch of questions there. Yeah. So maybe just a perspective on this is we're coming really from using innovation in use of digital connectivity and financial services to address predominantly market-related challenges. And so we're active in a number of solutions, working with providers who are offering solar water pumps and other productive use equipment on a finance basis, working with FMCGs on credit. But a key market that isn't working well is voluntary carbon markets in particular, where you have sellers, predominantly large projects that can afford significant time and costs of creating certified carbon credits, and buyers who have a high demand, and it's increasing, it's projected 50 billion globally by 2030, have a wish to contribute to projects in the global south, but they're predominantly buying over the counter, sort of blind sales. They don't really know where those credits are originated. So the core transaction between sellers and buyers exists, but for small projects, micro projects, it's difficult to access that because of the cost and the time and the processes, which are pretty analog. So there's lots of work to do around it in terms of regulation and support services, all that kind of good stuff. We're really trying to address that core issue, how to directly connect sellers with buyers at a more affordable, more efficient way, a mechanism, which is really, it's by magic, thank you, you've put up my slide, yeah. In a way that really utilizes the benefits of digital connectivity, because a lot of the markets processes that are being used were really developed, in the 90s, and haven't sort of taken that step change leap forward that digital can offer, and we're hoping to contribute to that. So really, this is our CAVEX model. It's relevant more generally, but I think we could just use it to illustrate the parts of the process. On the left are potential sellers. So those are micro small projects that are either reducing greenhouse gas emissions, so electric vehicles, solar water pumps, and so on, clean energy products in use, and removals, in this instance, reforestation. So those are projects that do have a valid activity that can be converted into a carbon credit and sold to buyers, but the cost is challenging. So what we're doing is we're digitizing the process end to end, taking data from those projects and passing it through the CAVEX system, which is where the carbon credits are created and certified and offered for sale to buyers in an open and transparent manner. They can actually see exactly where the projects originated. So if you have a European water company whose customers are paying a green tariff, for example, they might choose to contribute to projects that are originated, let's say, by solar water pump users in East Africa. So that's the bit that we're doing. But I think the challenges are common and the solutions are probably pretty common. The bits chunk down to how do you cost effectively connect those micro small projects to create the data that are required. You do need the processes in the middle that are validated and certified, and that is a challenging process. I wouldn't say it's for everybody. We believe CAVEX can be an open solution for many actors, and offering credits digitally to buyers who can have a choice. Then there's a big piece which touches on all of the discussions that have been made of payments going back to participants. The markets are not really intended to reward intermediaries. They're intended to reward the participants who are either reducing or removing the greenhouse gas emission. That's not the way the markets really work at the moment. Digital payments allows you can send money to an individual wallet if you want to, or you could perhaps pool funds to reduce the cost of financing women, let's say, to use particular assets. So there's a lot to do once you've created that particular value. The monitoring element, which is important for creating carbon credits, can also then contribute to the calculation and monitoring over time of co-benefits, such as gender co-benefits. So if you believe you can enable women to acquire assets, pay for them and use them to create incomes or time savings, you can perhaps, we're testing the ability to monetize that as a premium on a carbon credit, but you need to be able to monitor that over time. And you don't want the costs of monitoring to outweigh the finances created. So digital tools, as has already been mentioned, can help you to monitor over time. So in all of that, the role for broader, we believe there's a role for a digital platform in the middle, but all those elements, there's a lot to do there. In electric cooking, LPG, solar water pumps, there's unique problems relating to monitoring the devices, using the money in the most beneficial way, products and services around that, longitudinal monitoring over time, monitoring the benefits to women and other sort of co-benefits that might exist. So technology has so many opportunities here, but technology is not really the constraint. The constraint is getting the systems and processes in place that can actually connect the two sides of the market and then ensure that the users are really benefiting. And in all of this, I should mention, with thanks to UK Aid for having helped enable us to test all this and put this in place to date. Hope that helps.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, John, for that and for that wonderful presentation on CAVEX. So here it is, all the innovators out here in the group joining this interesting conversation today. You know where to go now. So if you're a micro project, contact John for sure, but also read about the CAVEX model, which can help you to access the critical issues of addressing the access to finance issues, but more importantly, getting into the carbon space as well. That leads me, how can we leave out the development partner out of this conversation? So Tim Rothman is a senior carbon market and climate finance expert whose career recently took a turn towards software development. That's passion. His passion is the closure of carbon finance workflows that delivers rapid and tangible results for communities. Welcome, Tim. And for you, especially considering that you're working on the other side of the community in terms of devising policies and setting up some innovative products to address the critical issues, how will the public sector benefit from digital technologies in the delivery of climate finance to vulnerable communities? Tim, over to you.
Thank you for that, Prakaka. So on the public side, the first thing is there is a major shift in the market right now. So the voluntary carbon market, I think we've seen that all in the news, is struggling with their justification. In many ways, the voluntary carbon market was the idea that you don't require the UNFCCC CDM, but you can actually reproduce the same procedures with the same project cycles in a privately managed entity. And that also was very helpful because the voluntary carbon markets have pioneered and experimented a lot more than the CDM back in the day. However, the CDM itself was the first such market, and that is closing. So all the voluntary markets that are basically copycats of the CDM procedures are running into big issues on the justification side. So everything I'm saying comes very much from the perspective we are doing this under the Paris Agreement. And I'm always trying, I've been in the carbon market for so long, it's really hard for me to forget the old rules, but it's time to forget them because we have new rules, and these new rules are the only thing that matter now. And just following up on what John said, these rules have been written in the 90s, and they are rules that are based on the idea that you send back and forth pieces of paper. So the changes are quite dramatical, but we cannot just ignore the capacities and also just human resources available in governments to handle this, because a lot of the things that used to be handled centrally at UNFCCC are now basically a burden on the individual countries. So what we are doing at UNDP is we are developing this digital public good, so a piece of software that is maintained by UNDP, but that any country or even private actor can take and install and utilize themselves without even asking us for permission. So it's kind of the idea of a digital public good is that. And what we are developing there is a oversight tool for national governments. So, and the key problem that is solving is the idea of double claiming. So if you have 3 or 4 or 5 different standards in a country, and they might all be claiming the same project, the only entity that has a legitimate claim to be the single source of truth is the national government. So I doubt that in the next 5 to 10 years, any voluntary carbon market without explicit government approval will be able to be maintained. So this would be a very exceptional. So, but at the same time, especially in the partner governments that we are most focused on, so small island states, at least developed countries, are kind of our guiding light. It has to work for them in order to work. The capacities are very limited. So I'm a bit worried about things like IoT, because they are hard to verify for a government. And even if they have a third party verifying it, then they still rely on some external consultant. And at least knowing like the donor government in Switzerland quite well, as I used to work for them in a previous job, they want to have all the understanding of how it works in-house, and none of them studied computer science. So there is no way they will ever be able to internally validate the accuracy of the calibration of an IoT sensor. So it has to be somewhat simpler for them, and somewhat, within the capacity, both by the donor and the national host government, to fully understand what's happening. So for AI and IoT, I'm always like, sure, you can play around with it, but I doubt you will get the official government approval that your system is accurate, because they just don't have the capacity to verify that. To me, the better way forward in terms of inclusivity is what we call standardized crediting frameworks, so that we basically just count the number of installations, or in the project type I'm most familiar with, it would be counting the number of students fed in a school and the existence of the improved stove. And as long as you monitor these 2 things, all the rest of the math is just automated default values. There is also no harm in getting less credits. So if we say we have to be conservative, right? We don't measure the actual efficiency. We just assume it's an increase by 50% based on historical data and experience. It's important to be conservative. And that works also because the prices are really good in the new Paris markets. So if you get half the amount of credits but double the price, you end up in the exact same spot. I also wanted to add a few words on the power of intermediaries, because most of this is based on negotiation power, basically. So if somebody like me with lots of experience in the carbon markets and knowing exactly how to roll up a project comes to a country, it's either you deal with me or you don't get any access. So I'm kind of in a monopsonist situation where I can squeeze prices and optimize my own benefit. So one thing that's really where we are also working on is to have these, so we call it it's basically a programmatic approach, so a program of activities where small individual actors can sign up to a specific project type, and making that barrier to entry as small as we can. And ideally, so at least in my work coming from the government, I usually like to work in public sector areas. So school kitchens are my favorite here. And in a school kitchen, like a lot of things are simplified. Like the entire budget comes from the Ministry of Education anyway, so we don't have to like reward individual schools financially, or we don't have to collect money from them, at least, because all the money is centralized through the ministry in the first place. So, and I think that we kind of have that working, that we basically have a template that goes from all the way from registry in the national government to monitoring and reporting for school kitchens. We are using video for that as the most simple and most accessible technology. Just a $50 phone is enough. And closing that loop to feeding that back in as monitoring data into the government system and issuing these credits. Just, I hope we can get the first this year, maybe early next, where we actually close that loop. Yeah, and I think that's, well, maybe one more last thing. I usually speak about firewood mostly, like fuel woods and wood-based energy, simply because it's 80% of the total energy demand. So if we look at just that from a very carbon perspective and ignore everything else, then fuel wood is clearly the point that we have to address first. And like solar and electricity are great, but they're kind of the next step. And also in terms of carbon, it's much less. So usually you need other financial models. Whereas cooking projects, you can basically finance 100% through carbon. So that puts them in a very special situation. It also means it can be more accessible because you don't need necessarily the payback, you need only the data flow back. And that's sufficient. One last thing on the benefit sharing mechanism. So this is something that has gotten a lot of interest. Like we hear that whenever I talk to governments, like how do we make sure the people who do the reductions actually have some benefit of the market? And well, one option is to subsidize the technology initially, but then building up a mechanism that can actually make payouts, ideally payouts for adaptation projects along the same streams of information flow that we have for the carbon project. I would say that's a lot of work cut out for us for the future. So we are still in the conceptual phase for the benefit sharing, but that's also something that's, it's on our agenda coming up soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tim. That's a very important point that you mentioned on the benefit monitoring mechanism, benefit sharing mechanism. I think in Africa, I think AFDB has come up with adaptation-based benefit monitoring mechanisms, benefit sharing mechanisms. And I think it's for every entrepreneur out there, every innovator out there, every company out there who is involved in carbon mitigation projects to look at it as to how they can plug into this. This is the time for, thank you again, Tim, for that perspectives, and simple solutions is something that is really resonates well with a lot of innovators. Any questions from the audience who have joined us, please feel free to put that in the chat bar. I've picked up a couple of questions here. I think this topic is intersection between a lot of things on the carbons as well as on the women issues as well. So John, you could probably attend it quickly, and Chintal, maybe you can also weigh in on this. The question is about women's participation in the voluntary carbon market. Is it particularly difficult for the poorest women to access voluntary carbon markets, and what can be done to ensure that they aren't left behind? You can go, John, first. Thanks.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So it's a really interesting area. I have some colleagues in the team who are looking at the opportunity to monetize a premium on top of the carbon price, where you can demonstrate gender co-benefits. The good news there, I think there's a lot of interest in this particular opportunity from foundations that have a particular interest in women, particularly directly benefiting from the opportunity. It's predicated, of course, that the carbon value can be achieved and that those monies can be directed to those women participants. That's hopefully an incentive then if you can also offer an additional premium. So it's really hypothetical at the moment. There are some very good methodologies generally for defining gender co-benefit, but the first challenge is, are the sales mechanisms in place to get those assets into the hands of women? Do they have the ability to do that? And then how do you ensure that women are retaining ownership, retaining the benefit, and what tools are you using to measure those in a cost-effective way? So lots of challenges. the opportunity sort of hypothetical financially out there, and then lots of methodological challenges. But generally, the size of the funding available from carbon markets with that premium, if and when achieved, is hopefully enough to get the innovations in place to put it all together. So I was going to pass to Chintal because...
Thanks, John. Chintal, how do we ensure women are not left behind?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure that I've got a sufficiently comprehensive answer. I think that John has probably given the gist of it. The only thing I would point to is the methodologies that John mentioned. So John, I don't know if you're already looking at things like the W+ standard, which we assumed you would, but it might be worth mentioning that, the W+ standard is one of the sort of few standards, if perhaps not the only one, which provides that framework for looking at projects and initiatives which are delivering gender benefit. And this is targeted towards sort of very low income and poor communities, and really seeing sort of benefits in terms of income, and other types of benefits. And they are partnered with the verified global standards. And again, John, I think will be a little bit more familiar with the ins and outs of this. So there is something out there to really help, in terms of an actual framework and a standard for saying, okay, when you think about, reaching some of these very sort of poor and low-income communities, what's the method? How do we actually know that, one, it is the target community, and two, it is like what kind of gender, benefits are being delivered? And because they are already partnering with things like the VCF standard, verified carbon units, and so on. It's a very intentional attempt to try and bring the two together to the co-benefits that John was talking about.
Yeah, and I think, so just from my perspective, really robust methodology, quite expensive to put into place. So the opportunity is to use, innovate around digital tools to bring the costs down to that, to make it really implementable across the board.
Excellent. Thanks, John, and thanks, Chintal, for that. A quick question to Michael. Michael, within a minute or two, if you can summarize how Airtel Africa or how MNOs in general can assist youth. Remember, Africa is a youthful continent, and how can technology help link the youth to climate financing, specifically in the agriculture sector? Michael.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really an important question. So first of all, as you rightly put, Africa has a huge potential in terms of the youthful population that we have. And then I think the other thing that is applicable to where I live and probably across Africa is also agriculture hasn't been very attractive, sort of sector for the youth. So I think with the use of technology, it makes it more attractive and easier for the youth to get involved. So to move away from the traditional way of doing, let's say, crop production or livestock production, to a more technical and probably a more efficient way of producing. So one thing, I think we've been intentional to ensure that a lot of our youth who have access to affordable and more reliable technology. So whether it's the simple things like the internet, smartphones, I think that's really one of the areas. But more importantly is to ensure that we use technology to avail the right information for agricultural production, whether it's on weather, whether it's on farm inputs, whether it's on markets for finished products. So simple technologies like use of SMS based solutions, use of mobile money, and of course information access through the internet. So it's important to create those linkages between, the providers of inputs, market information, good agricultural practices, to where the products would go. And so with a youthful population, I think that would work better. It makes it more efficient, and of course makes it attractive for the youth to get involved in agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that officially ends the panel discussion, but thank you so much for all the panelists, Tim, Michael, John, and Chintal, for sharing your perspectives. But before I leave and hand it over to Anna, let me just try to summarize the key points that emerged from this panel discussions. I think there is enough evidence that technology plays an important role. Technology has various components. There are simple technologies, there are complex technologies. So depending on the innovators' preferences, we can either go to simple technologies or we can go to more complex technologies like IoTs and the likes. There are platforms now, CAVEX, for example, where micro innovators can come in and plug in yourself to ensure that you can reduce the cost on ensuring how you can get the carbon credits. Technology, methodologies, technical assistance, all those things could be probably taken up under the different platforms, digital platforms that are available, so that the SMEs, MSMEs who are involved in the space of generating some credits are able to go together and have some platforms available. Women issues, of course, technology again can play a huge role in addressing those challenges. I think Chintal did mention about financial literacy, collaterals being one of the challenges, and how revenue-based financing could also become a critical component within this aspect of ensuring women are not left behind. Voluntary carbon markets, no one is going to leave that. We saw it when I started the webinar. This panel discussion, I did mention about the the newspaper had it very aptly titled Saudi War on the auction of carbon credits. So I think the war is going to get intense. The credits are going to get higher dollar rates. So I think voluntary carbon market is going to stay, and it is for innovators again to get into that space as well. And Tim did mention about many innovations that the donor community is looking at, but the most important thing that Tim mentioned is simple solutions. I think that will take us to places. And then he also did mention about benefit sharing mechanisms. So with that, thank you so much for all my panelists. And any questions, again, please put it in the chat box and we'll try to, I don't know whether we'll try to address them, but we'll at least get some good insights as to what the audience are thinking about this. Thank you again. And Anna, over to you.
Thank you. So as we draw our session to a close, let me just give some details about our next steps. So as the discussion has highlighted, digitally enabled climate finance space is a really exciting one and showing much promise, but we still have a lot to understand. And from our perspective, we're just at the beginning of our journey. So the report outlines recommendations on future investment and the implementation of digital enabled climate finance initiatives in low and middle income countries. It particularly highlights the need for more research and collaborative action. And we know that everyone has a role to play to try and solve something as complex as climate finance. So at the ClimateTech programme, we are continuing to expand our portfolio of work in this space. And that includes research that we're currently conducting with John Ridley's team on their CAVEX platform. With this in mind, we would like to invite all of you who have joined today and are interested to collaborate with us further. Please do get in touch. We have lots of different activities that we would like to explore, closed-door sessions, further webinars, more research, and we're open to your ideas as well. So please do get in touch either with Judith, Leila, who leads on our advocacy, or myself, and we would love to continue our discussions. Just a note to say, this session has been recorded, so will be available to view after. But I'd like to close by saying a huge thank you to our speakers today. Thank you to the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office for supporting this initiative. And thank you all for joining our session.